This is my week 2 video for COMM4513, and my comment this week is relating to Lane Crothers' Globalization and American Pop Culture. In Chapter 2, in various parts of the beginning of the chapter, Crothers talks about the Cosby Show, particularly on page 42, 43, 44. And one thing that I found interesting about that discussion was the popularity of the Cosby Show, and how the things about the Cosby Show, the apparent success of Cliff and Claire Huxtable, and kind of how together they were as an African American family, is why they were allowed to be relatable not only to American culture but to other cultures, like they discussed South Africa. And I just thought that that was really interesting, because I think, especially in more recent media history, there's a trend towards sort of the dysfunctional functional family. And those are typically white families with, maybe a key minority figure thrown into the mix for the sake of being relatable. But I just think it's an interesting point that popular Black television hasn't really come to a point where a dysfunctional Black family is allowed to be popular still. And, the Huxtables were all the way back in the 80s and 90s. So that was my thought about that. And then in Persuasion and Power on page 60, Farwell is talking about great orators and speeches, and in a section on page 60, he's just talking about important parts of different popular speeches by popular world leaders, like Winston Churchill's address to the House of Commons on June 9th, 1940, referring to them as poetic, and in many other places in this chapter 5, we see him talking about eloquent speakers, the great orators of our time, even those whose philosophies we may not particularly agree with. Their orator skills is part of why they were so successful in getting their message across. And I wrote in my assignment for this week about how Trump was successful in his campaign, but one thing that I had read in the media and subsequently found a reference for a study that was done, I included in my week 2 assignment, is that he actually speaks between a 4th and 5th grade level, which is far below presidents in recent history, and even other great orators of his time and in recent past. And so my question is, does that mean that we will see a trend, maybe in the political arena, or maybe just in speaking in general, of people dumbing down their language in order to have mass appeal? Clearly his strategy has been effective, and according to some discourse in the media recently, that was an intentional strategy to use language on that level, to appeal to a wider audience and a different type of audience that has been mobilized to support his campaign. So I'm curious to see where that goes in the future, and do you think that that's going to be a trend? So that is it for me for week 2. Thanks.